Here are the top stories we'll be watching this week. The UK and the EU aim to agree finally on the first stage of Brexit. GDP figures from China will reveal the impact of the trade war with the US, which will also affect the results of aluminium producer Alcoa, out on Wednesday. And the winner of one of the world's leading literary awards, the Man Booker Prize, is announced. First to the UK. Brexit, migration and the Eurozone will be on the menu for a crunch 1.5-day EU leaders summit in Brussels this week. Diplomats are putting together a draft version of a political declaration on the EU-UK future relationship. The most sensitive issue of the Irish backstop is expected to be thrashed out by EU leaders, with the aim of getting a final agreement at a special summit in November. The FT's Whitehall editor, James Blitz, has this analysis.
Things are always fluid with EU summits, and with Brexit nothing is ever completely certain. But it looks as though at this week's meeting, Mrs May and the leaders of the 27 EU states will agree the first stage of the Brexit deal. In other words, the Article 50 negotiation which seals the divorce, in which Britain pays £39 billion to leave the EU. There is an agreement on EU citizens, and of course that third and most tricky issue in many ways, the question of what happens over the Irish border. Well, that looks as though somehow that is also going to be resolved. If all goes well and the leaders leave with Article 50 signed, then they will move to the next phase, which is an emergency summit at some time in November, where everything will be brought together, the Article 50 draft that they have, and then the future framework for EU-UK trade, which will be a political declaration, not legally binding, but which will give some idea of where the UK's relationship with the EU will be in future. Difficult to make firm guesses, but at this stage it looks as though Mrs May will come back to the House of Commons at some point in November with a deal. The question then, of course, is whether MPs will give it their approval.
China's National Bureau of Statistics releases its estimate for third quarter economic growth on Friday. Investors will be looking for any signs of weakness in the numbers stemming from Beijing's escalating trade war with Washington. The Trump administration imposed tariffs on Chinese exports worth $50 billion annually in July, before targeting another $200 billion in September. The dispute has so far had little impact on the world's second largest economy, and Chinese officials are confident they can survive even a fully blown trade war with the US.
我想中方在中美经贸摩擦问题上立场是明确的，也是一贯的。我们一直在讲，贸易战解决不了问题，只会损人害己。中国有句话叫做"伤敌1000，自损800"。我觉得讨论谁损失1000，谁损失800，没有任何意义。
However, with investment and economic growth already slowing because of a government crackdown on risky lending practices and devaluation pressures building on the renminbi, President Xi Jinping has little room for manoeuvre. Investors will also be looking to see how the US-China trade war has affected Pittsburgh-based aluminium producer Alcoa, which presents third quarter results this week and has seen its share price fall by nearly a third this year. In late May, the Trump administration imposed a 10% levy on imports of aluminium. This comes on top of US sanctions on Russian producer Rusal imposed in April, which have caused widespread disruption in the global market for aluminium. Aluminium prices initially shot up by 30%, but have since fallen by 20%. The FT's commodities correspondent Henry Sanderson has more.
Alcoa's shares have fallen by about 30% this year, so investors will be looking for third quarter earnings for any sign that Alcoa has benefited from turmoil in the global aluminium market following the US sanctions against Russian producer Rusal. Aluminium prices have fallen back from their high level in April, but perhaps more critically, Alcoa is a big producer of alumina, the price of which has surged because Rusal was also a producer and Rusal's production was cut from the market. So investors will be looking to see that Alcoa has benefited from this rise in the alumina price. Investors will also be looking at the impact of the deepening US-China trade war, because not only its impact on demand for aluminium, but also the impact on Chinese supply. China is the biggest producer of aluminium, and the renminbi is weakened quite considerably, making it lowering their cost of production. So investors will be listening to see what Alcoa says about both global demand and global supply in the wake of this trade war.
The winner of the leading literary award, the Man Booker Prize, will be announced on Tuesday in London. More than 170 books were submitted for the £50,000 award. The 2018 Man Booker shortlist covers difficult issues from prison life to environmental disaster, incest, war, slavery and marginalisation. It is also a shortlist in which women outnumber men. But when it comes to the big reveal on Tuesday night, the thorny question of whether an American will take the prize for the third year running will be on everyone's lips. Rachel Kushner's tale of female incarceration, The Mars Room, is up against Richard Powell's novel about trees and people, The Overstory. And that's what the week ahead looks like from the Financial Times in London.